Donald Trump huffed and he puffed and he tried to block the movie based on his story, The Apprentice, from coming out, but he, in typical Trumpian fashion, failed. It's set to come out Friday, October 11th. And when you take a look at some of the clips, and we've got some of these exclusively right here, and you compare it to, for example, the recent debate where Donald Trump got destroyed by Vice President Kamala Harris, you see how well done this film is going to be. Donald Trump threatened he was going to sue the filmmakers. He's going to sue the writers. Guess what? We've got the writer with us right now. Pull him in, Salty. Here he is. Gabe Sherman's with us right now. Gabe, before bringing you in, I'm going to ask you about Donald Trump threatening to sue you, threatening to stop the film. Let's show this supercut that we made. Let's play it.
The first rule is the simplest: attack, attack, attack.
She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. They're eating the pets. Biden and you don't have the courage.
Rule 2, admit nothing, deny everything.
It wasn't done by me, it was done by others.
Roy Cohn is a crook. He's been indicted 3 times.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault.
Guilty as charged. Rule 3. No matter what happens, you claim victory and never admit defeat.
I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever got. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies.
Don't you forget, I made you.
And let's remember how Donald Trump started.
So good. We've got Gabe Sherman. This is a 7-year project. It's finally going to get released. Let me just start with this, Gabe. Donald Trump says he's going to sue you, sue the film. What do you say to him?
I mean, I say Donald Trump threatens to sue the mailman. I mean, I don't even know why that was news. He's, this is a classic playbook that he follows. It's a playbook that he learned from his mentor, Roy Cohn, that we explore in this film. It's a dramatic retelling of this relationship. Roy Cohn is played by Jeremy Strong, brilliant actor. Sebastian Stan from the Marvel films disappears into this role as a young Donald Trump. This is a side of Trump that the world has never seen. This is before he was famous. This is when he was a nobody. I mean, he was a rich nobody, but he was the son of a housing developer from Queens, and wanted to make it in the big city in Manhattan, and fell under the sway of this charismatic right-wing lawyer, Roy Cohn. So this is really where Donald Trump learned all of the scorched earth tactics that he uses today. And so it's an incredibly entertaining movie. I mean, it's this wild ride that you go on with these two characters, but it's also very illuminating because you'll see today's event, you'll see the world in a completely different light after seeing this film.
So tell us about that. Look, you've cut your teeth as a political journalist.
Yeah.
You covered Fox News. You covered the rise of Roger Ailes, which I always remind my audience here. That was a generational project post-Nixon, a 1970s memorandum. This didn't pop out of nowhere. They wanted to figure out how you basically keep Nixon in power in the future, and they got that on steroids.
They wanted to make sure Watergate never happened. I mean, they blamed Watergate. The right wing blamed Nixon's resignation post Watergate on the fact that they didn't have their own propaganda media apparatus. So yeah, this is these forces have been at work for 50 plus years, and obviously Trump is a part of that long history. Yeah, and my background, yes, I'm a political journalist. I cover Trump for Vanity Fair, and I'm also a screenwriter. And when I covered Trump's 2016 presidential campaign, I was struck by people like Roger Stone, who had known Trump since the 80s. They would say things to me like, he's just using the words that Roy Cohn taught him, or he sounds exactly like Roy Cohn at this moment. And it came to me in a flash. I was sitting at my desk and I was like, you know what? That's the movie. Donald Trump is Roy Cohn's apprentice. I mean, the title writes itself. So I think that was the origin of this movie, was taking all of my knowledge as a political journalist, but then, crafting this, fictional, it's based on real events, but obviously it's not a documentary. It's a dramatic retelling of this relationship. And I think, it It's this kind of movie that you go in, it's not a takedown of Trump per se, it's this wild ride, and you see really how this monster was made.
How this monster has evolved, though, over the 7 years since you started with this project must be interesting. I mean, perhaps there's other better words than interesting.
I never thought this movie would be coming out in an election season. This movie's never been more relevant. I wrote the script. I started working on it in the spring of 2017, and we tried to get this movie made so many times. Hollywood would not finance it. They were, it was too controversial. We had to raise money from independent investors overseas. That took years. We had to assemble the cast. And it just so happens that the stars aligned that this movie is coming out when it's never been more politically impactful. And I just can't believe the timing has worked out this way, because it was never, we never thought Trump would, be around again after 2020. After January 6th, he was so disgraced. I think it's a real kind of testament to the Republican Party that even after 2020, they welcomed Trump back into the fold.
Donald Trump's relationship, though, with Hollywood has always been kind of a tortured one, if you will, and he's been obsessed with it on his speeches right now, too. He always wants to talk about actors and this person in Hollywood. And when he tries to make a point, like just his most recent speech that he gave in Erie, Pennsylvania, for example, he'll always describe people relative to Hollywood actors. That's why this much sting kind of the most that there is this. Like, let me show you what he said in Erie, Pennsylvania. Yeah. He was describing migrants. Here, play this clip.
Okay.
They don't even think about it. These are rough, vicious, rougher than anything you can imagine. There is no, and I say it all the time, if you want to do a movie on some of these people that you're going to be looking at in 2 minutes, if you wanted to do a movie, there's no actor in Hollywood that could play the role. There's nobody that could do it. These actors, they're a little bit shaky. They can't play the role. They'll bring in a big actor and you look, you say, oh, he's got no muscle content. He's got no muscle. We need a little muscle. Then they bring in another one, but he's got a weak face. He looks weak. No, these guys have the whole package.
You see the people behind him too. They're like, what's going on?
What are you talking about? I think he has obviously this sort of love-hate relationship with celebrity. He obviously wishes and craves their approval, but because of his demagoguery and his politics, can't get it. So then he uses it to fuel his sense of victimhood. But what I love so much about Sebastian Stan's performance in this film is that it is not an impersonation. It's not Saturday Night Live. It's not a caricature. He completely disappears into the role. It's very subtle, but when you watch it, you suddenly feel like you're, it's not mimicking Trump. It's just you feel the essence and you really feel like you're with this person. And so I think Trump probably hopes it would just be like a caricature, because then he could, dismiss it. But it's so real and subtle that I hope it has the effect of, kind of peeling back the curtain, and we see him, art has a way of revealing truths about the world in a way that journalism sometimes doesn't. So this is a case where I hope, this movie can say something true about the world and break through in a way that other maybe forms of media hasn't.
You mentioned before that you were somewhat surprised, actually, post January 6th, that Donald Trump was able to kind of still become the leader of the Republican Party and be where he is today. One of the things that we talk a lot about here on the MeidasTouch Network is how the media, which is now, I refer to it as kind of, there's corporate media, then there's kind of independent media like us. But I think that a lot of corporate media, don't get me wrong, there are great journalists out there, but by and large, I think one of the big problems is corporate media has been sane washing his behavior and reporting on what he does as though it's just the other side and it's normal. And they almost act as his editors and his PR people, and they clip the good stuff. So as a political journalist who's, a script writer as well, I just would love to, but before we go, kind of get your take on the state of journalism I believe there's a massive, I mean, you can't overgeneralize journalism generally, but by and large, a failure to cover him with the threat that he actually poses.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I can't speak for other people's work. I can only speak for my own work, and I've been thankful to work at places like, now I write for Vanity Fair. Previously, I wrote for New York Magazine, where we were unfiltered. There wasn't a sense of sanitizing and whitewashing anything. I think the big, if you look back at, especially going back to 2016, you had places like CNN just covering his rally speeches unedited with no fact checking, just playing them live, essentially being his broadcast network, which, thankfully the networks do less now. But yeah, I think that kind of the normalization of him as a candidate it's been unfortunate. Yes, he is the candidate of one of the two political parties in this country, but there's nothing normal about him. And there isn't, you sort of both sidism is, I think, one of the failures of journalism. That, I thought post 2020 there would be some lessons learned, but it's still very hard for these big institutions to break out of there. They have such conventions about how they cover politics, right? If one side says this, we have to get a quote from the other side, and it's, the kind of legitimization of Trump has been unfortunate. I guess what I'm trying to say is he's sort of taken advantage of the fact that journalists try to act in good faith, and he's not acting in good faith. And so the result is that he's covered as a regular candidate.
No doubt about that. The folks at Briarcliff distributing this film, there was that moment in time about whether it was going to be distributed, but it found a home.
Thankfully,
October 11th is when it will be out. I'm excited to watch it. I'm sure the Meidas Mighty are excited to watch it. You've got almost 4 million people who subscribe to this channel who I know are going to watch it. So we'll give you our feedback, and after it's released, we'll have you come back. All right?
I'd love to. Please. Thanks, guys.
Gabe Sherman, the writer of the new movie, The Apprentice, coming out October 11th. Which is this Friday coming up, next Friday. We will be covering that as well the moment it's released. Hit subscribe and let's get to 4 million subscribers together.
Real quick, Meta just changed their algorithm to suppress political content. Please follow our Instagram at MeidasTouch right now as we head towards 400,000 followers so you don't miss a beat.